Flames roared behind him as the firefighter stepped out of the smoke, carrying life in his arms. Cassandra broke past the crowd, breathless. When their eyes met, she whispered, trembling, "You're too handsome, my hero." A cat in the live oak Charleston's humidity draped itself over the afternoon like a silk shawl, soft, heavy, and impossible to ignore. Cassandra Vale stood on the wraparound porch of her restored Queen Anne on East Bay Street, glass of sweet tea sweating into her palm, acquisition proposals fanned across a cafe table. The marsh light lifted the rose brick homes of Rainbow Row into a pastel hymn. Even after all these years and all her deals, the view still fluttered somewhere behind her ribs. She was the kind of woman Charleston noticed, thick, curvy, strikingly feminine, her hourglass framed today by a white silk blouse and a high-waisted pencil skirt in sea glass green. Her grandmother's pearls rested against her throat like a benediction of lineage. Cassandra skimmed a clause about waterfront easements when the peace was cleaved by a desperate, high-pitched sound. A cat's cry, thin, terrified, rattled the quiet. "Pearl?" Cassandra set the tea down so quickly the ice chimed. She slipped off her heels and crossed the porch, bare feet whispering over painted planks, then jogged across the brick walkway into the backyard. The live oak that anchored the property, 2 centuries old and sprawling, thick with resurrection ferns and Spanish moss, threw a cathedral of shadows across the lawn. "Pearl!" She spotted her Persian, white as linen and twice as temperamental, clinging to a branch that arched at least 40 feet above the ground. Pearl's plume of a tail trembled. She meowed again, a quaver that reached straight through Cassandra's chick composure and squeezed. "Miss Cassandra?" Evelyn Price, her housekeeper, hurried onto the lawn, apron still pinned. "Lord, that silly cat." "She's too high for the ladder," Cassandra said, mind already mapping risks. A bad jump, a broken leg, a fall. "Call the fire department, please." Evelyn already had her phone out. Within minutes, the far-off wail of a siren softened into a rumble. The engine turned the corner, red paint catching sun, and eased along the narrow alley to the back gate, drawing a handful of curious tourists. Charleston always had them, like gulls trailing a shrimp boat. Captain O'Rourke climbed down first, square, weathered, his authority casual as a well-worn glove. Behind him came 3 firefighters in turnout pants and navy shirts. One of them moved in a way that caught the eye first and then the breath, tall, broad-shouldered, his strength quiet rather than loud. He took in the tree at a glance, then the distance to the branch, then the cat, then Cassandra. His gaze didn't linger where other men's might have. It registered, measured, moved on. "Miss Vale?" Captain O'Rourke offered a respectful nod. "I'm O'Rourke. We got a call about a cat." "My Pearl," Cassandra said, trying not to sound like she was pleading with a municipal department the city had to share. "She's never climbed that high. The oak is historic. Please be careful with both." "We'll treat your tree like our own," O'Rourke said. He turned to his crew. "Cole, you're up." The tall firefighter, Cole stitched over his pocket, stepped forward with an easy, grounded confidence. Up close, the sunlight laid a sheen along the copper brown of his skin and picked out the clean lines of his jaw. His eyes, dark and steady, lifted to the branch. "We'll need the extension and a harness," he said, voice low, even. Then to Cassandra, in a tone that didn't condescend and didn't defer, "Ma'am, cats can panic when a stranger gets near. If she spooks, I'll need you to talk to her. Keep her anchored to you." "Of course," Cassandra said, surprised by how quickly she trusted him. She had made a career out of reading men, their angles, their ego, their price. With this one, her instincts offered nothing transactional. They offered a word she almost never used in business: safe. "Pearl's her name?" he asked, already checking the lines on the harness, the knots on the rope. His hands were deft, precise, the choreography of someone who is intimate with risk and refuses to romanticize it. "Yes, like the necklace," Cassandra said, then flushed at her own frivolity. "Sorry, she's family. I get it." A flash of a smile, brief but warm. "I'm Andre Cole." Cassandra's mouth shaped the name once privately. Andre, like the taste of something she hadn't known she wanted until it touched her tongue. They extended the ladder, metal clacking soberly against bark older than any living neighbor, and braced it. Andre checked his clips, then checked them again. He touched the oak with a palm, as if greeting an elder. Then he climbed. It wasn't bravado, it was patience. He moved like a man who understood both gravity and forgiveness, easing around the thick knots of wood, testing each rung, the harness line a clean line against sky. Halfway up, Pearl emitted another thin wail. Cassandra tilted her face to the blue and spoke as he'd asked. "Pearl, baby, it's Mama. Stay put, good girl. Don't you move." Andre reached the branch and shifted his weight onto it. The oak accepted him. He kept 3 points of contact, centered his mass, then spoke softly, and Cassandra realized he wasn't only talking to the cat. He was telling the tree he would be a respectful guest. "Hey, sweetheart," he murmured to Pearl. "We got you. Big day, huh? Lot of moss, lot of view. Time to come down." Pearl stared, pupils blown to moons. She hissed once, uncertain, then seemed to reconsider when Andre didn't flinch. He eased a mesh rescue carrier from his back, anchored it to the line. He didn't reach yet. He waited. He let the cat decide. "Talk to her," he called down. "Pearl, look at Mama," Cassandra said, the words cracking into something naked. "Come on, darling. Come home." Andre shifted an inch, then another. Pearl blinked. The hiss became a low, unhappy bleat. Then, astonishingly, she nosed forward, as if the man's steadiness had built a bridge in midair. In one efficient, tender movement, Andre guided her into the carrier, fingers sure, pressure gentle. He clipped the door shut, checked the latch twice, then once more, because precious things deserved redundant care. "Secured," he called, bringing her down. The descent took longer. The oak's limbs made a puzzle of angles. Pearl kicked once inside the bag, then settled as Andre murmured something too soft for anyone to catch. Cassandra didn't realize she'd been holding her breath until her lungs scolded, and she exhaled. When his boots found grass, the backyard exhaled with her. Evelyn, the captain, even one tourist who'd pressed his face to the wrought-iron fence. Andre unclipped, swung the carrier around and offered it as if returning a child. "She's fine," he said, voice still calm, still practical. "Fright's the worst of it." Cassandra knelt, wrenching the zipper carefully, and Pearl flowed into her arms in a luxurious spill of fur, immediately burying her face in Cassandra's blouse. Tears burned the corners of Cassandra's eyes with a heat that embarrassed and freed. "Thank you," she said, and it wasn't enough. Andre's smile tugged like a dimple that refused public office. "You're welcome. Miss Vale," Captain O'Rourke said, stepping in just enough to take pressure off the moment. "We're glad to help. You can always call if there's danger to person or property." He paused, letting the delicate word cat hover like a shared joke and then drift. "We don't accept personal rewards. If you want to show appreciation, the department has a community fund. Literacy, smoke detectors in low-income homes, that kind of thing." "Of course," Cassandra said, but her eyes were on Andre. "I'll donate." She hesitated, then sounded more like the woman who brokered waterfronts and less like a girl with a skinned knee. "Officer Cole. Andre, could I?" She caught herself, recalibrated. "May I buy lunch for your crew sometime? Catered. All of you." Andre slid a glance to O'Rourke, then back to her. "We appreciate the thought," he said carefully. "There are policies, but the fund helps a lot of people." Cassandra heard the line he wasn't speaking. She also heard the courage of speaking at all. "Then I'll give to the fund," she said. "And if there's ever an event, volunteers needed, I'm handy with a checkbook and a hammer." She surprised herself with the last part. It felt good to say it. It felt like a small rebellion against the golden cage of being seen and not useful. Andre inclined his head. "We'll hold you to it." Cassandra wanted to hold something else, to the moment, to the feeling of being regarded without agenda. "Thank you," she repeated, and Pearl, squashed against her, purred like a small engine. They cleaned up the ladder. The tourists drifted away. O'Rourke shook her hand with gentlemanly finality. Andre adjusted the strap on his helmet and started for the truck. "Mr. Cole?" Cassandra called, and he paused. She didn't plan the next words. They simply arrived, true and ridiculous at once. "You were." She stopped herself, a heartbeat, from saying it, from saying you were beautiful up there, you and the tree, like a secret ceremony. "You were very kind." His eyes caught hers, steady as they'd been 40 feet in the air. "It's the job," he said, but the corner of his mouth conceded something softer. "Take care of that cat. Always." She wanted to add, "And you take care of yourself," but that would be claiming kinship she hadn't earned. Instead, she watched him climb into the truck, the door thudding shut, the engine's growl swallowing the memory. As the truck pulled away, Pearl kneaded her collarbone. and Cassandra felt the ache of a day that had rearranged itself without asking. Evelyn touched her elbow. "You all right, honey?" Cassandra nodded, but her gaze was on the alley mouth where the engine had disappeared, on the slice of sky above the oak where a man had moved with respect and no fear. "Yes," she said, though the word arrived wrapped in a question. "I think so." Inside, the proposals waited, a neat stack of numbers pretending to be destiny. Cassandra carried Pearl through the French doors. The house smelled of lemon oil and history. She set the cat down and, instead of returning to the table, walked to the window that framed the live oak. The limb where Pearl had clung swayed a fraction, unbothered. Cassandra pressed her palm to the cool glass. It struck her then. This was the first time in months that gratitude had filled her without transaction. The first time someone had entered her orbit not to impress, not to attach, not to take. He had simply done the work. Done it beautifully. The sun lowered. The proposals could wait. In the reflection, Cassandra saw a woman standing very still, pearls bright against her throat, eyes awake in a new way. Somewhere down a web of streets, a man named Andre Cole was coiling rope and washing a truck and laughing with his captain about tourists and cats. Their worlds were separate, named, patrolled, but the oak had stretched across both. Tomorrow, she promised the window, she would call the community fund. And maybe, she didn't know how, only that she would, she'd find her way to the place where gratitude didn't need a gate. The following evening lingered in Cassandra's chest like the aftertaste of sweet tea, warm, sharp, and unforgettable. She sat at her vanity, brushing out her golden hair, while Pearl lounged in a silk cushion beside her. Every sweep of the brush only returned her thoughts to the firefighter who had climbed a 200-year-old oak with the kind of assurance money could never purchase. Andre Cole. His name had followed her around the house like a melody that couldn't be silenced. She tried to distract herself with work, reviewing new contracts, penciling notes in her leather-bound ledger, but every time the pen reached the page, she remembered his voice, steady and grounded, telling her to call Pearl's name to calm the cat. He had given her something more than a rescue. He had given her the reminder that some people carried a kind of strength the world didn't teach. Only hardship did. She tried to dismiss the thought as romantic nonsense. Men had always found her attractive. She knew this, had wielded it like an accessory in negotiations. Thick hips, soft curves, a waist that cinched her blouses into enviable lines. She wore confidence the way others wore perfume. But Andre hadn't looked at her like a prize or a trophy. He had looked at her with respect. She wasn't sure she'd ever felt the difference so sharply. Her phone buzzed. Evelyn's text, "Miss Cassandra." The firehouse left a note with donation details. Placed it on your desk. Cassandra padded across her study, robe trailing, Pearl's purr following like background music. A plain sheet of paper sat atop the stack of proposals. Typed instructions, a list of programs, a contact number. She traced the black ink with her finger as though it were handwriting. She imagined Andre's hand passing the note to his captain, imagined him insisting they keep it professional. She smiled, but her chest tightened with the need to cross that boundary, to say thank you in a way no paper could hold. By Friday afternoon, the entire city seemed to close in around her. The Young Professionals Association dinner, a fundraiser she'd attended for years, loomed on her schedule like a chore. She arrived at the Ocean House wearing sapphire silk, her figure draped in confidence and old Charleston pedigree. Men leaned in too close. Women measured her necklace. Conversations circled the predictable subjects: property, politics, lineage, who was marrying whom. Cassandra found herself nodding at the right times while inside she compared every handshake to Andre's steady grip, every laugh to the sound of his voice coaxing Pearl from the branch. "Cassandra, darling," Victoria Middleton trilled as she swept in, pearls jangling like small bells. "My cousin Bradford has just returned from Savannah. A Whitworth by blood, of course. He's launching a law firm here. He's perfect for you." Cassandra glanced at Bradford, all polished shoes and cultivated smirk, and felt an emptiness. Her life was filled with Bradfords, polished, suitable, hollow. She thought of Andre's harness scraping bark, his eyes lit with focus rather than calculation. For the first time, the ballroom's chandeliers seemed to spotlight not glamour but emptiness. By Saturday evening, Cassandra made her choice. She drove herself in her Range Rover down streets she'd never entered alone, her pearl earrings gleaming against bare skin, her heart hammering louder than the tyres against asphalt. Meeting Street narrowed, filled with mom-and-pop shops, barber poles, murals of smiling faces. Children laughed in doorways. The scent of fried fish and collard greens floated through the air. She parked, smoothed her skirt, and stepped onto the pavement as if onto another planet. Bertha's kitchen glowed with yellow light. Inside, families leaned close over chipped tables, hands busy with cornbread and fried chicken, voices rising in affection and argument. No one glanced twice at her, except with curiosity. Who was the blonde woman in pearls stepping through a doorway meant for neighbours, not tourists? Cassandra swallowed nerves and let the warmth of the place pull her forward. Andre was already there, waiting near the counter. He wore khakis, a pale blue shirt rolled at the sleeves. Without the uniform, he looked even taller, broader, yet softened by the casual clothes. His eyes widened when he saw her. "You actually came," he said. Cassandra tilted her head, trying to sound lighter than she felt. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "Honestly," he admitted, his smile crooked with honesty. "I thought you'd realize this was outside your comfort zone." His voice dropped, thoughtful, "and maybe outside what people expect of you." She moved closer, emboldened by the truth between them. "What people expect has never satisfied me, and I've had enough of being satisfied with appearances." He studied her for a long moment, as if measuring whether she understood the weight of what she was stepping into. At last, he gestured to the table by the window. "Then let's eat." They ordered shrimp and grits, fried green tomatoes, sweet tea in sweating plastic cups. Cassandra, who dined weekly on amuse-bouches and imported wines, tasted flavours that flooded her senses with something she couldn't remember the last time she'd had at a dinner. Comfort. Andre told her about the first fire he'd fought, the smoke that clung to his skin for days, the pride he felt when they pulled 2 children from a burning duplex. He spoke of his grandmother who raised him after tragedy, who drilled into him that kindness was currency more valuable than dollars. Cassandra found herself telling him things she had never confessed over champagne, how the luxury developments she built sometimes felt like theft, how her social circle suffocated her with scripted conversations. He listened without interruption, his gaze steady, his respect palpable. For the first time in years, Cassandra felt seen as something more than a figure in heels. "You said the other day that our worlds are different," she said at last, pushing her fork aside. "You're right, but that doesn't mean they have to stay separate." Andre leaned back, arms crossed loosely. "It's not that simple, Cassandra. You can step into my world for an evening and still go home to yours. I don't get that privilege." "I'm not asking for privilege," she countered, her voice quiet but steady. "I'm asking for honesty, and for a chance to see if 2 people can meet somewhere in the middle." The restaurant hummed around them. Laughter, music from a radio, the clatter of plates. But for Cassandra it all blurred. There was only the weight of Andre's gaze, his internal battle visible in the furrow of his brow. She wanted to reach across the table, to touch his hand, but she waited, knowing the next move had to be his. At last, he exhaled. "My grandmother used to say you know someone's true character by how they treat folks who can't give them anything back. Tonight you came here, sat at this table, treated everyone with respect. That tells me who you are." His lips curved slowly, a smile reluctant but real. "Maybe I was wrong about you." Her pulse fluttered. "Maybe?" he chuckled, shaking his head. "You're persistent. I'll give you that. And you're too handsome for me to give up on after one dinner." She said impulsively, the words tumbling out before she could catch them. His eyes widened slightly, amused, caught off guard. A warmth spread across her cheeks, but she didn't retract it. She let it hang there, true and unpolished. For the first time since she had stepped into Bertha's, Andre reached across the table. His hand covered hers, warm, calloused, steady. Cassandra stilled, her world narrowing to that touch. Around them, life went on. But in that moment, she knew the rescue from the tree had only been the beginning. Rain polished Charleston's cobblestones the following week, turning the city into a watercolour of reflections. Cassandra Vale moved through her office on East Bay, the smell of fresh paper and ink spilling from stacks of contracts waiting for her signature. She should have been focused on the closing of 3 multi-million-dollar properties that would cement her dominance in Charleston's real estate market. Instead, her mind returned, again and again, to the warmth of Andre's hand over hers in Bertha's kitchen, the way his eyes softened when she called him too handsome, her hero. She had not felt that vulnerable in years. Vulnerability wasn't in the Vale playbook. Her life had been one of elegance and precision. Deals negotiated, appearances maintained, lineage preserved. Even her body, thick and curvy though it was, had always been another polished weapon, dressed in couture that emphasized her hourglass form, heels that clicked like punctuation marks at the end of her sentences. But Andre had looked at her not as a weapon or a prize, but as a woman, complicated and human. Pearl pawed at her skirt, demanding attention. Cassandra scooped the cat up, pressing her against her chest as she stared out the office window. From up here she could see the outline of the live oak where Andre had moved like grace made flesh, steady and sure, carrying her cat down as though he were carrying something priceless. Something in that memory unsettled her, and yet she clung to it. Later that night, she attended another society dinner, this one hosted by the Middleton family. The dining room of their Georgian home buzzed with the usual cast of Charleston's elite, bankers, attorneys, landowners, the self-appointed guardians of the city's future. Cassandra entered draped in emerald silk, a gown cut close to her curves, a diamond brooch catching candlelight. As she glided through the crowd, voices hushed, eyes narrowed, not with admiration, but with the quick, sharp curiosity of gossip. "Did you hear?" someone whispered behind her. She was seen on Meeting Street, at Bertha's kitchen of all places. "With a firefighter," another voice added. "A black firefighter." Cassandra's spine stiffened, but she kept her smile practiced and easy. Years of conditioning taught her never to flinch. She accepted a glass of champagne, made polite conversation, and laughed at the right cues. Inside, though, the comments burned. They had followed her into the room, wrapping her in invisible chains of judgment. Victoria Middleton cornered her near the mantelpiece. "Cassandra, darling," she said, the word darling carrying more judgment than affection. "You must be careful. People talk. Being seen in certain neighborhoods with certain company can, well, you know how Charleston is." Cassandra's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, I do know how Charleston is, which is exactly why it needs to change." Victoria blinked, startled, then smoothed her expression back into composure. "Change comes slowly here, my dear. Best to remember where you belong." Where she belonged. The words sliced through Cassandra's silk and pearls as if they were nothing. She spent the remainder of the evening drifting through the rooms, feeling like an actress in a role she no longer wanted to play. Every conversation about politics or family ties, every chuckle over inherited wealth, only reminded her of how different Andre's world had felt, how warm, how unpretentious, how real. When she finally left, the night air hit her like a baptism. She walked briskly down the steps, ignoring the soft murmurs behind her. Sliding into her car, she pressed her forehead against the steering wheel. For the first time in years, she wondered what it might feel like to stop performing. 2 days later, she made good on her promise. She called the number on the donation sheet. Her check funded smoke detectors for low-income families, literacy programs in neighborhoods the Vale family rarely stepped into. But she didn't stop there. She asked if she could volunteer, if she could serve food at one of the fire department's outreach dinners. The woman on the phone had been surprised but grateful. On the evening of the event, Cassandra pulled her hair back into a simple bun, wore dark jeans that hugged her hips and a plain white blouse. Without jewelry, without heels, she felt almost naked, yet freer. When she arrived at the community hall, the scent of barbecue and cornbread wrapped around her. Long tables overflowed with food. Laughter filled the room. Children ran between chairs. Andre spotted her immediately. He was in uniform trousers and a navy shirt, sleeves pushed to his elbows, revealing strong forearms dusted with flour. He was carrying trays of macaroni and cheese, his movements practiced and natural. His surprise at seeing her softened into something gentler, pride, perhaps, or gratitude. "You came," he said when she approached, his voice pitched low beneath the chaos of the room. "I told you I would," she replied, smiling, though her heart pounded. "Besides, Pearl insisted I come thank her hero properly." Andre chuckled, shaking his head. That cat's got you wrapped around her paw. And you don't? She teased before realizing how close her words had landed to the truth. A blush heated her cheeks. He didn't press, only handed her a pair of serving tongs. Then let's put you to work. Together they served plates, refilled drinks, passed out bread rolls. Cassandra found herself laughing with children, listening to elderly women recount stories of Charleston that never made it into glossy brochures. She was clumsy at first, unused to the rhythm, but Andre moved beside her with quiet encouragement, steadying her when she faltered. At one point their hands brushed, his warmth sparking through her like electricity. She glanced up and found his eyes on hers, steady, questioning. As the evening wound down, Andre walked her to her car. The street lamps cast halos in the damp air. "You didn't have to come," he said. "I wanted to," she replied softly. "I wanted to see your world, not just as a visitor, but as someone who respects it." Andre studied her in silence for a long moment. "Cassandra, this isn't going to be easy. People will talk. They already are. Your world and mine, they don't mix neatly." "Then let them talk," she whispered, her voice firm despite the tremor in her chest. "For once I don't care." The street fell quiet around them, the sounds of laughter fading inside the hall. Cassandra could hear her own breathing, the thump of her pulse. Andre took a small step closer, close enough that she could smell the faint scent of smoke and soap on his skin. "You're too brave for your own good," he murmured. She tilted her chin up, emerald eyes catching the lamplight. "And you're too handsome for me to let go of, my hero." The words slipped out again, a truth unvarnished. Andre's lips parted in surprise, then curved into a smile that felt like sunrise. He didn't kiss her, not yet, but the air between them tightened, thick with promise. Cassandra drove home that night with Pearl curled in her lap and a heart that felt both terrified and alive. For the first time in her life, she knew she was no longer chasing acquisitions or approval. She was chasing something far rarer, a connection that could burn through Charleston's oldest boundaries. The gossip grew louder as summer deepened. Cassandra felt it in the glances of women at the club, in the carefully coded comments at luncheons, in the way business partners shifted their tone when her name came up. She had been seen more than once with Andre now, first at Bertha's kitchen, then volunteering at the firehouse dinner. Word travelled fast in Charleston, carried not on winds but on whispers that seeped through drawing rooms and fundraisers like perfume. She was no stranger to scrutiny. As one of the wealthiest women under 35 in the city, eyes had always been on her, measuring her clothes, her jewellery, her companions. But this was different. This was not curiosity about who she was dating, or whether she would expand the Vale Empire into Savannah. This was disapproval with teeth. Old Charleston disapproval, the kind that remembered its own rigid hierarchies and did not take kindly to transgressions. One evening she sat at a dinner table hosted by a family friend. The dining room glowed with crystal and candlelight, but Cassandra felt cold beneath her silk dress. Across the table, an older woman leaned toward her, voice low enough to sound conspiratorial, yet loud enough to be overheard. "My dear, I heard you've been spending time outside your circles. Such kindness, I suppose, but people talk. You don't want to waste your reputation on something fleeting." Cassandra sipped her wine, letting the tart dryness anchor her. She smiled politely, though her pulse pounded. "I don't see kindness as a waste," she said, "and I don't see people as circles." The room stiffened. A cousin coughed, someone shifted silverware, and then conversation resumed, carefully ignoring her statement. Cassandra's cheeks burned, but she refused to look down. Afterward, she drove home along the quiet streets, Pearl's soft carrier in the passenger seat because she'd refused to leave the cat alone after a vet checkup. The city lights blurred as her thoughts pressed against each other. Was she reckless? Was she selfish? Or was she finally honest about what she wanted? Andre had been patient since that night outside the community hall. He hadn't pushed. They exchanged texts, small moments. She sent him pictures of Pearl sprawled across her contracts. He sent her brief notes from the firehouse, updates about calls, jokes about burnt toast when he tried to cook. The simplicity of it grounded her. He asked nothing of her wealth, never angled for favours. With Andre, there was only presence. Yet every time she looked at him, she felt the weight of what he risked. He wasn't exaggerating when he said consequences fell differently. If people in his department or neighborhood thought he was being reckless, it could cost him more than whispers. It could cost him trust, stability, even promotion. A week later, Cassandra invited him to her estate. She hesitated before sending the message, wondering if she was selfish to bring him into her world rather than continuing to meet in his. But Andre agreed. He arrived on a warm evening, pulling up in a modest truck that looked out of place against her wrought-iron gates. He stepped out in simple jeans and a button-down, and Cassandra felt her breath catch the same way it had the first time she'd seen him climb her oak. He looked around the gardens with quiet appreciation, not awe. That humbled her. She realized how many men she'd dated who used her wealth as a mirror to check their own reflections. Andre simply saw what was there. She poured sweet tea on the porch and sat across from him, the same porch where he had first walked toward her in uniform. "You look nervous," he said, smiling slightly. "I am," she admitted, folding her hands in her lap. "I don't invite people here unless they already belong. And you make me feel like I don't belong to myself unless you're near." He studied her face, his dark eyes steady. "That's a beautiful thing to say, but Cassandra, are you ready for what comes with it? Because it won't be easy. I can handle stares, comments, even anger. I've lived with those shadows my whole life, but I don't want you hurt." She leaned forward, voice fierce despite the tremor. "I'm already hurt, by emptiness, by pretending the world is fine the way it is. I want more, and I want it with you." Andre reached across the table, took her hand and held it. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, rough skin against smooth. "Then we'll do this together," he said. For weeks they carved out pockets of time. Morning coffees at quiet cafes, walks along the Battery when tourists were thin, nights when he came after a shift, and sat with her on the porch while Pearl twined around his ankles. The connection grew in small, deliberate increments, like fire coaxed from coals. Cassandra felt herself softening in places she'd kept rigid for years, and Andre confessed dreams he rarely spoke aloud, of becoming a fire chief, of creating programs to bridge gaps between the department and communities that distrusted them. But the more they grew closer, the more the outside world intruded. An article appeared in a local society newsletter, all insinuation and carefully chosen words. Miss Cassandra Vale was recently spotted dining outside her usual circles. Perhaps Charleston's most eligible businesswoman has taken a philanthropic interest in the city's civil servants. The tone was mocking, almost cruel. When Cassandra read it, her chest tightened with both anger and shame. Not shame of Andre, but shame that people could twist something genuine into gossip fodder. She called him that evening. "Did you see it?" she asked. "Yes." His voice was calm. "I'm so sorry," she said, words rushing out. "I should have known. I should have protected you better." "You don't have to apologize," Andre replied. "This is what I meant, Cassandra. It's not just about you or me. It's about the weight of history in this city. But listen." His voice softened. "I don't regret a second. Do you?" She closed her eyes. "Not one." "Then we keep going," he said simply. Still, the strain pressed on her. At the next board meeting, an older trustee made a pointed joke about firefighters rescuing more than just cats. The room laughed, and Cassandra forced a smile, but inside she was shaking. Afterward, she excused herself to the restroom, gripping the marble sink until her knuckles whitened. She stared at her reflection, pearl earrings, emerald eyes, curves dressed in couture, and wondered if the woman in the mirror had the courage to dismantle the cage she'd lived in. That night, when Andre came by after his shift, she stepped into his arms before he could speak. "I don't care what they say," she whispered into his chest, tears staining his shirt. "You're too handsome, my hero, and I won't let them take this away from me." He held her until her breathing steadied, then tilted her face upward. "Then don't fight them alone," he said. "Let me stand beside you, whatever comes." Cassandra pressed her lips to his, sealing the vow. In that kiss lay defiance, longing, and the first true taste of freedom she had ever known. The storm broke late one August night. Charleston's air was thick with heat, thunder rolling low over the harbour, when Cassandra's phone lit with a call from Evelyn. She answered groggily, Pearl curled at her feet. Evelyn's voice trembled. "The Whitfield warehouse on the riverfront. It's on fire. They say it's spreading fast. Half the fire department's already there." Cassandra sat upright, heart pounding. The Vale family held holdings in the area. But that wasn't what made her blood run cold. It was Andre. He would be there. He always went. The idea of him inside a burning building while the city watched from sidewalks filled her chest with panic. She dressed without thought, linen dress clinging to her curves, hair unpinned, pearls forgotten. She drove through streets lit by sirens, the night alive with flashing red and the smell of smoke. When she reached the riverfront, crowds had gathered behind barricades, faces pale in the glow of flames. The warehouse, a hulking relic of brick and timber, belched fire into the sky. And there, silhouetted against the inferno, men in turnout gear moved like shadows of war. Her eyes sought him instantly. Andre, helmet low, climbed a ladder toward a second-story window, hose line slung across his shoulder. Even from a distance, she recognized his steady rhythm, his refusal to rush though chaos howled around him. Heat radiated in waves, sweat beading on her forehead though she stood far back. Someone shouted that a worker was trapped inside. Cassandra's stomach twisted. She saw Andre disappear into the orange mouth of smoke, rope line trailing. Her hands gripped the barricade so tightly her knuckles blanched. She couldn't breathe. All around her, bystanders whispered prayers, held their phones high, but Cassandra could only whisper his name. Minutes stretched like hours. Flames devoured roof beams. A section collapsed with a roar, sparks shooting into the night. Cassandra cried out before she could stop herself. Then movement. Andre emerged from the smoke, carrying a limp figure across his shoulders, staggering under both weight and heat. 2 firefighters rushed to meet him, guiding him down. Cassandra surged forward, pushing past startled onlookers until she reached the edge where the medics clustered. Andre lowered the worker gently to the ground, then tore off his helmet. His face was streaked with soot, eyes raw from smoke, sweat pouring down his temples. But he was alive, breathing, and more beautiful to her in that moment than anything Charleston's wealth could buy. Cassandra broke past the line, ignoring calls to stay back. She fell to her knees in front of him, cupping his soot-stained face in her trembling hands. "Andre, my God," her voice cracked. "You're too handsome, my hero. Don't you ever scare me like that again." His eyes, bloodshot but steady, locked on hers. A weak smile touched his lips. "Can't make promises in this line of work." He coughed, but even his cough sounded like defiance. "But I'm here." Tears spilled down her cheeks, streaking her makeup. She pressed her forehead to his, oblivious to the cameras, the whispers, the shocked society women who recognized her pearls even in the dim light. For once she didn't care who saw. She only cared that Andre was still in her arms. Later, after the fire was contained and the worker stabilized, Andre sat on the bumper of the truck, breathing oxygen from a mask. Cassandra stayed by his side, her hand entwined with his, her skirt smudged with soot. Captain O'Rourke approached, giving Cassandra a look that balanced authority with understanding. "He'll be fine. Just smoke inhalation." "Thank you," Cassandra whispered, though her eyes never left Andre. When the last flames were doused, when the last hoses were rolled, she insisted on driving him home. He resisted at first, saying he could handle himself, but she overruled him with a ferocity that surprised them both. In her car, the silence was thick, broken only by the hum of the engine and his occasional cough. At his small house in North Charleston, she followed him inside. It was modest, worn sofa, photos of his sisters, a quilt draped across a chair. The scent of smoke clung to him, but beneath it she smelled soap, the faint trace of the man who had coaxed her cat from a tree weeks ago. She reached for a towel, wet it, and wiped the soot from his face with a tenderness that made him still. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly, though his hand closed around her wrist, not pushing away. "I need to be," she answered. "Tonight made me realize how easily I could lose you. I won't waste another second pretending what this is." Andre's eyes searched hers, dark and uncertain. "Cassandra, your world doesn't forgive women who cross lines like this, and mine doesn't forgive men who reach too high. They'll tear us apart if we let them. Then we won't let them." Her voice was fierce, trembling with exhaustion but also certainty. "They've taken enough from both of us. Let them talk. Let them choke on their whispers. You're the only thing that feels real." His hand lifted, cupping her cheek, thumb brushing away soot and tears. For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy with choice. Then he kissed her, slow at first, then urgent, as though the fire still burned in his lungs and she was the only air he trusted. Cassandra melted against him, curves pressing to his solid frame, the taste of smoke and salt and relief mingling between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Andre rested his forehead against hers. "You don't know what you're asking," he whispered. "Yes, I do," she said, lips brushing his. "I'm asking you to let me stand beside you, not behind, not above, beside." For the first time, he didn't argue. He only pulled her close, holding her until the storm outside quieted and dawn began to bleed pale light across the horizon. In the days that followed, the city buzzed with talk. Photos had been taken. Cassandra in silk, kneeling before a soot-streaked firefighter, whispering words that every lip-reader in Charleston seemed eager to interpret. Her board called her reckless. Her friends called her naive. Her mother called her scandalous. But Cassandra, sitting on Andre's porch with Pearl curled in her lap and his arm warm around her shoulders, realized she no longer cared. For once, her life was not about appearances or acquisitions. It was about a man who climbed into flames for strangers and still found gentleness for a frightened cat. A man who saw her not as wealth or power, but as a woman who could finally exhale. "You changed everything," she told him one evening as the cicadas sang. He smiled, eyes glinting in twilight. "You did the same for me." And in that fragile, powerful exchange, Cassandra understood the truth she had been circling since the day Pearl climbed the oak. Love, real love, was the only inheritance worth keeping.